All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to this inaugural conference of the Northern European Partnership for Sustainable Finance. My name is Ben Caldecott. I'm here representing the Secretariat for the Partnership and also the conference committee that put together today's event. You'll be hearing from the chair of the partnership after my introductory remarks, but I've been asked by the chair to cover off two things quickly. The first is to describe some of the thinking behind the partnership and a bit of its backstory as well. And secondly, to say something about plans for the future and how you can all get involved. Apologies, by the way, for my voice. The beast from the east left me with a bit of a cold. My voice left me yesterday, so I'm hoping it's going to last me for at least 5-10 minutes. So, backstory. So the idea of a collaboration focused on Northern Europe, focused on sustainable finance. We first discussed this with the European Climate Foundation and the Finance Dialogue in December 2016. We then held an inception meeting in June 2017 where these ideas were explored further and bottomed out, and a wide range of organizations, some of which represented here, attended. And we were inspired by two sets of questions. And the first concerns leadership and innovation. How can we sustain and accelerate improvements in the theory and practice of sustainable finance and investment globally? We've obviously achieved quite a lot, and we'll explore more of that later, but quite a lot of that is insufficient. Some of it, in fact, is superficial. We need an energetic cycle of innovation, adoption, obsolescence, and we need that to get underway quickly if we're going to achieve real and lasting change in finance. So how can that be achieved? And what can we learn from other sectors that have successfully developed through continuous innovation? And there are examples out there. The second set of questions concerns Brexit. So we're a minute in, and I've mentioned the B word, apologies. But December 2016, obviously this is a post-referendum result, the center of some of the thinking going on. How can we ensure that we have the architecture in place to ensure cooperation on sustainable finance across Europe after Europe's largest capital market leaves the EU and the single market? So the partnership is, in part, a response to these two challenges. We felt that supporting cooperation and collaboration across Northern Europe could go some way to addressing both of those issues, as well as many others that we could talk about too. So on innovation, we know that innovation usually happens in clusters. There are clusters of expertise that set the standard, set the pace of innovation in key sectors globally. Think Silicon Valley and tech. Silicon Valley and a couple of other specialist tech centers. You could argue that London is one of those in terms of fintech, lead, and then those innovations spread outwards and are adopted by everyone else. In some sectors, there might be more than one obvious cluster, perhaps several, sometimes with different specialisms. All of this is quite well understood. And obviously, finance exhibits that tendency to cluster as well, with major agglomerations of capital and expertise. But the point is that innovation doesn't happen everywhere. It only happens in some places, and only happens in places where a bunch of conditions hold, together with a good dose of good luck, good fortune. So to have a productive long-term innovation strategy in sustainable finance, we therefore need to pick out where real innovation and leadership is happening and where it's likely to be sustained. Where do the conditions for sustained leadership exist? Where are the clients? Where are the assets? Where's the regulatory and political alignment? Where's the research being done? Where's the thought leadership? Where are the startups? Now, Northern Europe has these conditions in spades, and this has been evidenced by outcomes. For example, on the regulatory side, the Bank of England has completely shifted the debate on the relationship between climate change, finance, and financial regulation. In Denmark, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, pension funds have been pioneering how to take account of climate-related risks. Norway's Global Pension Fund is setting norms for how sovereign wealth funds should consider climate change. The French government is pioneering new forms of mandatory climate disclosure. And there are loads of other examples, which we'll talk about today. But the point is that here in Northern Europe, we have an ecosystem of institutions across the investment chain working on sustainable finance topics, from green bonds to climate-aligned indices, through to new analytical approaches, and obviously regulatory innovation too. Not every part of the ecosystem is doing as much as it could be, And I would point out an example here in the UK. You know, pension funds in general in the UK are doing much worse than those in Scandinavia and the Netherlands on sustainable finance, for example. But these differences, even in a part of the world where standards are very high and higher than anywhere else in this area, highlights, I think, the scale of the opportunities for learning from each other, how much further we have to travel together, but also the scale of the market opportunity, the untapped market opportunity. There's still a lot there. Now, the East Coast, the West Coast may step up, and that might be helped post-Trump, so might East Asia. But the action on sustainable finance, the innovation and the leadership is overwhelmingly concentrated in Northern Europe. So if we want to nurture and accelerate innovation on sustainable finance, so we can get actually closer to aligning finance with sustainability, where should we focus? Well, we should be focusing here. And it's important that we recognize that we have the conditions here to lead this process of change, not just to adopt or follow innovations created elsewhere by others. And the faster this innovation can happen by nurturing collaboration and leadership here in Northern Europe, the quicker and more likely we are to implement successfully the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. So on Brexit now, moving to that lovely issue. So the UK is Europe's largest capital market and has Europe's largest financial centre. And this is by a very long way. It's not, unfortunately, depending where you come from, of course, it's not that London is a tiny bit ahead of Paris or a tiny bit ahead of Frankfurt. It really is staggeringly large relative to the other financial centres, right? And this isn't going to change with Brexit, although I'm sure there's a debate to be had with colleagues from other financial centres about this. But in any case, you know, even if it's right that Brexit will result in London being eclipsed in finance by other financial centres, that change will happen over a very long period of time. So the UK will be a part of this jigsaw puzzle on sustainable finance, irrespective of the Brexit outcome. That's sort of the hypothesis that we have. And given that, we need structures and processes that allow member states and non-member states to cooperate and collaborate on sustainable finance post-Brexit. This is important beyond Northern Europe, of course, because this cooperation can support efforts elsewhere in Europe. It can support supranational action across the European Union, for example, through the Capital Markets Union, and it can support efforts in the G7 and in the G20. Now, I know that the European Commission might say, and some people might say, well, we have a mechanism to do this already, Ben. It's called the European Union. You know, fair point. But I think there are probably two responses to that. One, you know, not all member states get this or have the capacity or inclination to lead on this. I fear the European Commission will see this as its recommendations from the HLA come out. And let's be honest about that. The second is that I think we're right to experiment with other structures, particularly in this field. The current and future, to be confirmed, non-member states, Norway, Switzerland, the UK, are doing a disproportionate amount of work in this area. So this partnership has, very candidly, been created in part to help lay the foundations for deepening collaboration across institutions in member states and in non-member states. The extent to which this will be helpful or needed will, of course, be tested. And it all rather depends on what happens between now and the 29th of March next year. So I hope that gives you a sense of the backstory and the rationale. Now, quickly to the future and how to get involved, and Sylvie will say more about this and we'll explore this throughout the day. So a Canadian I know who is in the audience somewhere, I saw Hamish somewhere, there you are, Hamish, tweeted that maybe we're trying to create the NATO of sustainable finance, which I thought was quite flattering in some way, I suppose. But I think the key thing here is that this is actually about leadership on sustainable finance and global innovators coming together to accelerate change. So it's not a partnership that I think everyone can join or will join. So in that respect, the ante to be part of the game is very high and should stay very high. You have to be at the forefront of changing best practice in your relevant domain, and that's going to be a moving target. Now, in time, the geographical focus may change. Maybe we'll go all NATO, we'll go all North Atlantic, maybe we will go pan-European, maybe we will go plurilateral and focus on a global coalition of the willing. There are other examples, like the Powering Past Coal Alliance. Or maybe we'll stay focused on Northern Europe. And after all, there is a very serious, impressive pedigree in this part of the world when it comes down to innovations in finance and investment. And you've just got to think about the origins of banking and accounting, particularly in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance in northern Italy and the Low Countries. Now, that's obviously another talk, but it's important to think about the historical background as well. But the answer is we don't know yet the sort of how this scope will evolve. But I think for the time being, we should focus on Northern Europe and make an aim to sustain it as the best place on earth for sustainable finance and investment. We're obviously close together. We're basically in the same time zone. And through that, we can help change the world and also bring significant economic benefits to our countries and regions. So this conference is an opportunity to see and mobilize around the latest innovation in sustainable finance. It's an opportunity to identify potential collaborations, to learn from peers. So I hope you relish the opportunity. I hope you reflect and think about how we can improve the conference for next year and also the other activities that we're planning to do. Now, Sylvie, who is the chair of the partnership, is going to tell you more about the agenda, as well as the broader range of activities in the partnership and also the governance as well. And then we'll have the first session. At the end of today, you'll, in sort of Oscar-like style, you'll find out who will be hosting the 2019 conference. It'll be very, very exciting. But please, if you do want to get involved, speak to me or Sylvie or other people involved in the organizing committee. Think about how you could initiate activities that could help deliver on the objectives of the partnership. Ask us how we might help, how we can support that work. But I hope, I'm very excited about all of this. I hope you are too. So enough from me. Over to Sylvie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Silvia Kreibel. Some of you know me. I'm the head of the Frankfurt School UNEP Collaborating Center for Climate Finance, a think and do tank for climate finance, and also the host of the Green Finance Cluster in Frankfurt. Before that, I've worked for 17 years for Deutsche Bank, also here in the city, in corporate finance, so I know the capital markets business pretty well. It's a great honor to chair this initiative, and thanks for giving me the chance to add some words about my vision for the partnership. But before I do that, I want to applaud Ben, the Secretariat of Oxford Smith School, the sponsors, European Climate Foundation, and the Finance Dialogue, and all those who have been involved from the very beginning on, shaping the idea of the partnership. Thanks for the very hard work and the enthusiasm to make this happen. Mobilizing the world's financial centers and its institutions will be essential to scale up climate finance and to make progress with regard to the reallocation of capital flows. And Northern Europe is at the very center of this development and the global efforts to align finance with sustainability, including focus on policy, regulation, and investment practice. And it's great to see how far we have come. I think the HLAC working group is a great demonstration of the willingness of the private sector to become part of the solution and not being part of the problem. It's great to see that these climate change-related questions are now discussed at the CEO level. And this development has clearly started here in London. But personally, I think there is also still a long way to go. And I remember a training course last year in summer at our school when a head of equity research of a leading German bank stated that the Paris Agreement won't have any effect on the terminal value of utilities. So I think it's still a long way to go, and there's a good reason why we need more mainstreaming, why we need more discussions and more events and conversations about the topics which are on today's agenda. I don't want to debate with Ben about the financial center and who will dominate in future. It's a Frankfurt representative now chairing this initiative. No, joking. The question is, do we really need a dominating financial center? I think on the one hand, yes, we need a cluster, we need a center for thought leadership and for the deep dives. On the other hand, it's also about mainstreaming, and it's about crowding in of other financial marketplaces. And the partnership will be open to those ambitious stakeholders. We acknowledge that the mainstreaming and the crowding in is done very much at the level of these national clusters and the national green finance initiatives. And we will try to identify the gaps and fill the gaps, and we will do our best to find the right balance between thought leadership and a deep dive and expanding the group of those supporting the green and sustainable finance movement, and to find a good work split between national initiatives and coordinating initiatives like the partnership. Ben said that the Northern European Partnership for Sustainable Finance has been established as an international corporation designed to ensure that Northern Europe continues to be at the center of innovation. And the activities of the partnership will develop over time, and we will be flexible. We want to make sure that there is a limited overlap with existing initiatives, but we also see a value in coordinating initiatives. So rather than reinventing the wheel, it's about coordination, ensuring that we introduce best practices, that we learn from each other. So for now, there are 3 key areas of activities. The first one is accelerating innovation in Northern Europe by increasing the scale and pace which good ideas are turned into practice through adoption. For example, helping good ideas finding support from practitioners and policymakers. The second task is to inform and connect policy and regulatory developments across Northern Europe and turn them into international processes and standards. And then the third one is identify and support opportunities for cooperation between the actors in Northern Europe. The partnership will involve quite many organizations and representatives from Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. Quite significant group of people already. And many representatives also from relevant European institutions. It will be open to actors from all of the stakeholders, including regulators, policymakers, but also civil society. And let me add some personal remarks on the objectives of the partnership, and hopefully we can also touch some of those topics again in the panel discussions later on. The first one relates to the ambition level. In my view, it's very much about decarbonizing the world, not only our portfolios. There is a tiny but very important difference, which we have to consider, in my view. At least for the interim period, until the transformation fully cooks in and change the demand patterns, we need to widen the rationale for our action beyond the pure argument of materiality. The second thought is on SDGs versus climate. It's about the future we want, not only material climate risk affecting the stability of the financial sector. And the future we want, some of you might remember, that was the title of the outcome document of the Rio+20 conference. The want implies that there is more than only climate risk, shaping the future, not only the financial sector, and supporting a transformation which has to start. And the we implies that we need a strong support, a bottom-up support. It's not only about top-down regulation. The financial sector is used to work as an intermediary, and I very much hope that we also see our role in creating demand for sustainable finance, sustainable investment products, and we can create appetite for the future and provide ideas how this future could look like, not only the future of the finance sector, but also the whole economy. So supporting the transformation towards the future we want hasn't become easier in the current political environment across the globe with the political shifts to the right, so I think this will be a major challenge for us. The third thought is on transformation and the decarbonization having effects on all parts of the economy. There was a hype around divestment from coal, the need for more investments in renewable energy. Many suggestions of regulatory environments and regulatory interventions focused very much on the black and the white, or the brown and the green. The true challenge, in my view, is in the 90% in between. We have to make sure that we support forward-looking adaptation of business models in the real economy, and this is far more complicated than having maybe a penalizing factor for brown investment and a supportive factor for green investments. And finally, I think we need to be humble enough to accept that no single initiative will change the world. So let's lobby for efficient combination of intervention and activities within the financial sector, but also across sectors. The finance sector alone won't fix that. So we, as a collaborating center in Frankfurt, are part of the UN family. We have quite some experience in how we can move away from the core problem. UNEP, UN Environment, focused or started with the initiative on carbon pricing. We haven't been successful. We focused on green economy, wasn't successful. And thereafter, we now started the inquiry for green financial regulation, and we see some progress there. But we have to make sure that we constantly remind that we need to have an efficient combination of real economy regulation and financial sector regulation. And we need to flag this great opportunity and the value added of the financial sector if real economy regulation kicks in. So for today's program, this initial conference is a great opportunity to see and to mobilize around the latest innovation in Northern Europe as they relate to sustainable finance and investment. We want to create the opportunity to collaborate and to learn from peers working in sustainable finance and investment. The day is organized in 5 sessions, including one session after lunch, which will give the stage to various financial sector or financial center initiatives to present their concepts, their respective focus areas, initial success stories, their motivation and their ambition. The other 4 sessions offer some deep dives into specific topics. There have been quite many conferences over the past months on focusing on discussions around these topics. So let's try to make this conference special and allow for some controversial debates, because I really believe that these controversial debates will help us to unlock some potential. And having attended a pre-conference dinner yesterday evening, I know that the speakers are well prepared and really willing to have these controversial discussions. So I very much hope that we have a lively debate here on the stage today. I hope that the sessions will also provide good food for thought for the break, for the dinner tonight, and also for your work in the coming months. For us, representing the partnership, it's a great opportunity to see where there are gaps, to test our work plan, to see where we have to adjust it, and where there is still need for coordination. We will listen very, very carefully, and please feel free to approach Ben and myself in case of any questions or suggestions. And then join us to shape the future for the cooperation in Northern Europe on sustainable finance and investments. And I wish you a very great day, and hand over to Jessica, who will moderate the first session on the future of asset ownership, opportunities for sustainability. Thank you.